Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge, and welcome to Eldridge and Company. Ester Fuchs is a professor of political science and the director of the Urban and Social Policy program at Columbia's School of International and Public Affairs. She's also a consultant, a speaker worldwide. She does everything, and she knows everything, and she's a friend of mine. So hello, Ester.
Hi, Ronnie. So nice to be with you.
This must be an exciting time for you, because you teach governance, so you must be, I don't know what's going on in Washington. You teach everything. You're a strategic planner, basically, aren't you? And strategy, you teach everything, and you know everything.
Boy, I should have come on the show many more times to make myself feel so good.
And you also worked for Michael Bloomberg for 4 years, taking a leave of absence from college, doing just that, strategic planning and merging and improving systems. But you were also close and ran a program with David Dinkins. So why don't we start with talking about him and that?
Oh, thanks, Ronnie. And as I said, I'm really delighted to be here with you, and I love your show. So, yeah, we lost a giant in New York City politics, I think in American politics, these past 2 weeks with the passing of Mayor David Dinkins. I was very lucky to have the office across from him at Columbia and to work with him pretty much since he left, as he said, since the voters threw him out of public housing. That's how he used to describe it. And I worked on the Dinkins Forum with him and on his courses and on projects we did together. And I always felt for many years that his legacy was really underappreciated and not very well understood in the context of the time in which he became mayor. And, you know, it's worth mentioning when we think about Mayor Dinkins and what he did for the city. What was it like when he was elected mayor? What was New York City like? Because there are some parallels now. When Mayor Dinkins became mayor, he inherited a fiscal crisis, an economic crisis. The city was hemorrhaging jobs. There was a racial tinderbox in the city. People may remember Yusuf Hawkins and how he was killed running on the expressway in Queens. There was a homeless crisis. There was an AIDS crisis, and there was a crack epidemic. That's what Mayor Dinkins inherited. You know, not everybody can be as lucky as Bill de Blasio was when he first became mayor and inherited not just a balanced budget, but a surplus from Mayor Bloomberg, so that he could spend without thinking for 6 years until the COVID crisis. But Mayor Dinkins came in at one of the most difficult times in New York City's history. And he won intentionally. He came in intentionally. Voters put him in intentionally because of the racial crisis. And people need to bear in mind that New York was the last of the 10 major cities to actually elect an African-American mayor. And in New York, it required that he attract 30% of the white vote. I know, Ronnie, you were there, you remember it. You were part of that coalition, helping to put that together. He won in the first race in '89 by 30,000 votes. And he lost by 30,000 votes. So the transformation of what happened when he lost, that people think was this enormous repudiation, was really not. He put together a gorgeous mosaic in a time when it was really quite difficult to do that, because he understood the metaphor. The metaphor is very important. A mosaic retains separate pieces, but it connects. It was important that we came together in a holistic way, respected each other, maybe even appreciated each other, but that we were allowed to retain our own identities and our own values. And his coalition, most importantly, was put together by asking people to look at what they had in common, not look at what divided us. And I think it's interesting to look at the second election when he ran against Giuliani the second time. It's a precursor to the Trump strategy. Giuliani went in intentionally to divide people in this city. He went into Brooklyn, where in the post-Crown Heights riots, things were still very raw. And he went in there and he went into the Orthodox Jewish community to poison the well, to essentially peel off those voters, to tell them lies, just like our current president did to win, to tell people lies, so that and to make them think that people who were different from them were against them, were taking something away from them. He sowed fear. Fear was really his coin of the realm, Giuliani. And Dinkins was about telling people what they had in common. And you know what, Ronnie? It's easier to win in politics when you divide people, right? Than when you try and bring them together.
You know,
he only won by 30,000 votes that time, Giuliani.
Right.
So people need to remember that.
Yeah, it is a direct parallel to what is in Washington now, because you have a Barack Obama who is a calm, reasonable, a leader, but calm, followed by Trump, who is just, as you said, causing disarray. And the common denominator in that whole thing is Rudy Giuliani. So,
and there's no question that
Mayor.
The same reaction. We had this highly competent, incredible African-American president.
Right.
Race was used to divide people by Trump.
Exactly.
Well, you know what? Race was used by Giuliani to divide.
Of course. You remember the PBA rally?
Yes, I do. And that was why I decided, when David Garth asked me to do that second Giuliani campaign, story I don't think I've ever even told in public, to be the issues director for that campaign. I was very upset about the Crown Heights riots like everybody else, but I said no, because I had a gut feeling about Giuliani when I saw those riots, and because we know a lot of people voted for Giuliani.
Right. I was in the city council. They always called me the left, the left wing. It was always the extreme left. Anyway, what you said is really a great honor to him, and I think sorely needed, because we do fall into make these radical differences, and it's a little misunderstood. Let's go to the city right now.
Yeah.
What's going to happen? And how many people? We have a lot of people who are willing to undertake that task.
Oh my God. We have a city, reeling from, again, multiple crises, right? So we have our health crisis, which created this economic crisis. And as a consequence, at least, 500,000 people have left the city. Some will come back, some won't. For my part, none of them have to come back.
Right.
On the other hand, I want to continue to have a strong tax base in the city. I'm not one of these people who believe, that we should be dividing people along class lines and attacking wealthy people because they're wealthy. We need wealthy people in the city to pay taxes if we want to do redistribution.
But do you object to their paying a little bit more?
I mean, we can increase taxes.
Yeah,
there's no question. We've got to do that. But we also have to cut spending. And this is what I worry about, because whoever comes in after the current mayor is going to have a disaster. We are not getting a handle on the fiscal problems now. So, the Citizens Budget Commission's estimating, a $10 billion hole in the budget over the next 4 years, which is, about $3 billion a year. What people didn't notice is what Mayor de Blasio did over the last 6 years. And to me, this is kind of amazing when you think about what he did in terms of increasing spending and increasing the workforce. He added 33,000 people to the New York City employment rosters. 33,000. If we would just roll back, 10,000, 15,000, that'd get us a long way back to reducing our costs.
What do they do? I mean,
well, that is a very good question. What do they do, right? So if we would ask New Yorkers that age-old question, are you better off now than when this current mayor took office? How many people would actually say yes?
Very few.
Very few, if any, right? I mean, very, very few from, I don't care what race, ethnicity, class, religious orientation, borough, whatever our divides are, gender. People, the only thing people seem to be agreeing on is that, dissatisfaction with the current mayor. But we're not in this fiscal crisis right now just because of COVID and the economic downturn. Part of the problem is that we have expanded the budget and the municipal employee payroll at a level that's unsustainable over the last 6 years. And no one's talking about that because it's so much easier to spend money. Who wants to run on a platform, I've got to cut spending? Nobody, you don't get people to vote for you by saying I'm going to.
Why hasn't the controller said something?
So he's put out a lot of reports, and this is a problem we have in New York because the New York Times stopped really covering
covering the local news. Yeah.
It's every so often they'll come out with an article, but it's not the day-to-day coverage. When I was writing my book on mayors and money, and I did a little history of the 1930s fiscal crisis in New York City and Chicago, you could go back to the Times to get the detail of the people who were doing it in Chicago, let alone New York. They covered everything in detail. What really was, information. And now, so, we have great coverage online, from a whole bunch of different media, City and State, City, Gotham Gazette, the Gothamist. But people still read the Times, and if it's not in the Times, people don't know about it. So, I had the same question you had about the controller, and then I went and did some research. He's issued a series of reports, and he's even taking the mayor to court now, looking for the money that we got from the federal government to buy protective equipment that never showed up.
So now what? Is there anybody planning, anybody really looking at this and really maybe coming up with some solutions?
So there are things that we have to do in the short term versus what we'll have to do when the next mayor comes in. In the short term now, from my point of view, the most important thing is not to do what we did in 1975. And nobody is saying this. I am saying this. Not to do what we did in 75. In 75, to balance our budget, we cut the guts out of basic services. You remember, the crime was up. Schooling, that's when the schools really started to deteriorate. The parks were dust bowls. You name it, everything was a mess. We lived through it. We know it. And I've been thinking about this. Part of the reason it took so long for New York City to turn around was because of this decline in police, fire, sanitation, basic services that people count on. We need businesses to locate in this city. They create jobs, and we need middle-class people and working-class people to live here. They pay taxes. And, if we create a situation where crime starts to go up, the rate of gun violence in New York is up by an astounding amount over the last year. What's going on, And then de Blasio, in his cuts, he cuts sanitation. I mean, walk down the streets now, you'll see, look in the parks, it's a disaster.
Do they have no, right? As you go through this, we talked about Mayor Dinkins, but what about Mayor Lindsay, who I worked for? And when you said he cut sanitation, I mean, that was his demise, but the reason for his demise. But we have no history, and we don't have, I don't want to say this, but we need some more people to run this city. right?
No, and I'll tell you first and foremost, I don't want somebody who's going in on the job training, right? We have multiple crises. I didn't even begin to list all of them: the health crisis, the fiscal crisis, the economic crisis. We have a racial crisis. We have multiple crises in this city now. We can't afford to have somebody who don't, who can't find the bathroom at City Hall when they get there. I mean, we need people who can hit the ground running. I know there are a lot of smart people coming into this race, but we need people who have managerial skills, who have skills understanding the politics of the city. One of the reasons why de Blasio's budget is so high is, in my view, if you look at what happened when he ran in his second race, nobody ran against him. No reasonable person who might have gotten a vote ran against him in the Democratic primary. His approval ratings were not high then. Why was everybody decided to take a pass? Because he immediately rounded up all the union endorsements. How did he do that? Look at those union contracts, okay? Now, I'm not anti-union. I believe everybody should get a raise, but we got a big problem. He rolled back some of the savings that Bloomberg had put into place around pensions. It's just not sustainable. That's what's happening now. He increased the number of municipal employees. The only way to save money is actually to reduce heads. Everybody knows this whole business of managerial savings. We can do more with less. Remember that expression from 75? Well, guess what? You cannot do more with less. And so there has to be shared sacrifice. And shared sacrifice, what did Willie Sutton said? You have to, if you're robbing, why do I rob banks? I'm going where the money is. You have to go into the budget where the money is. And the money is in the head count primarily and in benefits to municipal employees. That's where the money is. And so the city has to cut spending over there. And contracts need to be reopened, and there needs to be, de Blasio, what did he do? He postponed spending to the next fiscal year. That's how he saved money. The person who's going to come in has a double problem then.
So since you are an urban affairs professor and you have centers at Columbia, are you calling a working group together? Is anybody calling a working group together to really analyze this and make some recommendations?
Look, there are groups that have come together. It's complicated. The politics in the city is very complicated now, partly because of the rise of the Democratic Socialists, who, which I get, the progressive agenda I get, and it's important, and I support probably almost everything on the progressive agenda. The question is, what can the city really do, given the constraints on its budget, given the fact that people who pay taxes can leave? I mean, to me, the best example of the problem was, the Amazon deal. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tweets about the Amazon deal in the beginning. Well, we can save that money that we're giving to Amazon and use it for something else. It was a tax abatement. You and I know what a tax abatement is. That's not real money. That's money you give in anticipation of somebody coming, and then taxes go up, and then they don't have to pay the same rate of taxes. But it's not money in your hand that you can move in the budget over to another item.
It certainly doesn't happen. It certainly doesn't happen in the real estate business.
That's right. And not to make a distinction between providing tax abatements for businesses creating jobs versus real estate developers building luxury apartments.
Right.
Like, to me, why haven't we gone after that and made sure there are no more abatements for luxury apartments?
Because of the political part of it. And that's why I think any group that gets together to decide the future also has to include some really honest political people who are going to explain what goes on in the city.
Right. I worry about this because when, we both know the devil is in the details here. This is, it's just like we have a balanced budget in New York now, accepting that what he's done is moves it
up further, right?
That's right. So this is not a good thing. And so I do agree with you. we also need, you know, the people who represent different communities in this city to be at the table and to be honest brokers, which is very hard because, you know, advocates are, I mean, I learned that when I was in government, my view was always the advocates are always right. Then when I went into government, I thought, oh my God, there's like another side to this that I totally missed in a way.
But the advocates are also important because
they're important. They have to do their job.
Right.
You know,
we just have to be able to judge them. Right.
That's right. There needs to be, somebody, we need a mayoral candidate who really will understand both three things: the politics, the governance, the absolute operations of city government, how it works, and the fiscal issues, which are the money issues. All of this is what I'm teaching now to my students who are like, yo, you know, they have all these great policy ideas. I said, okay, where are you going to get the money from and who's going to pay for it? And by the way, does anybody know how to do it?
You're helping to disenhance another mayor's race.
That was pretty easy, right? Others have done it way before me. You know, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants as Mayor Dinkins likes to say.
But I want you, now you're going to have to come back because the election from the mayoralty election is so strange and it's so different. And I don't know how anybody gets their message really out since it's all virtual. And as you said, the press, I don't know, it's all local television and radio, basically.
You know, it's going to be the turnout game, the old turnout game.
That was one of the questions I wanted to ask you. I mean, we had a lot of people voting in New York City in the presidential election. We don't have lots of people voting in our municipal election.
It's going to be who has a constituency they can turn out. And this is why the Democratic Socialists have become so powerful, because the regular Democratic Party can't turn out people anymore.
Oh, it's terrible. The regular
Democratic Black churches turning out, the Orthodox Jews, the unions, and the party. Parties have a hard time turning out. You know, if it wasn't for Stacey Abrams in Georgia,
right? We wouldn't. Right.
She was doing, you know, for 5 to 10 years, she was creating a new organization designed to educate and turn out voters because the parties have failed us all across the country now.
Well, Esther, thank you so much, Professor.
Oh, you're welcome. It's just such a pleasure to talk to you.
And we're going to talk more about the mayoral race in the spring.
I hope so.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.